Okay, we should be streaming live now, even though it's saying that I've got a little, there we go, perfect. Right, I'm gonna let people in and welcome to, this is 2022's first online morning startup.
Yay, yep, back online. We'll probably be doing this for a little while WA gets over this next chapter of its COVID experience. All good. All right, we'll just wait for people to join in. Who have we got? Hello, Adrian, Adam, Alexander. Cool. People are coming in. All right, well, we might as well get going with the intros. So welcome, everyone, as you pile in the Zoom meeting. My name's Scott Glue, one of the organizers here at Morning Startup. And here we also have
me back from feels like a long time, haven't been around. So yeah, my name's Steve Newman. I can't call myself an organizer any longer. Poor Scott has been running this show for a few months now, or more than a few months. So big kudos to Scott for keeping it together while I've been away focusing on building a business, like so many of us on this webinar now. So it's good to be back online.
How's the leg, Dave?
The leg is still in a boot, mate. It is still in a boot. I think 3 months in a boot, having broken or snapped metatarsal. So, yes. The thing
skateboarding at our age, dude.
Skateboarding, not 40-year-olds. So.
Oh, man. Never mind. And we also have joining us here today, Brad Rees, who's going to be taking us through turning ideas into businesses. He is a serial entrepreneur in the truest sense of the word. He's been hacking on multiple different ideas and for ages. And I think he's going to take us through 5 of those. I don't think that's all of his portfolio, but he's going to be sharing what he's learned by getting 5 very different businesses off the ground. So, but first, before we get into that, I just want to put a word out that we are accepting shameless plugs and intros in the Zoom chat. So it's not quite as personal as it is at Riff, where everyone stands up and introduces themselves and things, but feel free to use the Zoom chat. Just make sure when you do it, there's a little option that says host and panelists. Change that to everyone, so that everyone in the Zoom chat can see what you're talking about. So throw your links in, give shout outs to what you're working on. If you've got an ask, if you're looking for developers, if you're looking for a co-founder, now is your chance. There's a whole ton of people in the Zoom chat that can hopefully help you out. And also, if you've got questions along the way, post them in the chat. There's also a Q&A section in Zoom, so post them there as well. And we'll go through Q&A sort of at the end of the presentation, unless Brad wants to be interrupted throughout if there's something totally urgent that needs to be answered then and there. All right, so we'll let those shameless plugs come in. Come on, where are they? Oh my God, an OG host, says Richard. Yes. All right. Well, we've got a shameless plug. So the next morning startup event, we've got the man that needs no introduction, Charlie Gunningham. He has a new job at the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation. And he is going to be talking about West Australia's Innovation Booster Grant. So these things used to be called the Innovation Vouchers, where I think it's like 20 lucky startups in Perth can receive up to $20,000 in funding. I think it's matched 20%. So you've got to raise 20% of that yourself, and then they'll give you up to 20 grand. I think that's the way it works. I'm not 100% sure, but this guy is going to tell you all about it in 2 weeks' time. So if you're eager for a bit of seed funding to get that idea off the ground, it's a good thing to get around. Cool. No other shameless plugs. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Come on, guys. Where are you? All right, Dave, do you want to handle our first sponsor of the day?
Yes, MA Marketing, to Cam and Jack and the team over there at MA Marketing. Thank you very much for sponsoring this. They help us cover the costs of when we go online. MA Marketing is a great, if you're looking to sort of find out what makes you different and help you kind of get your marketing stuff up and running quickly. If you haven't checked it out, check out the Weird Growth podcast as well. It's out. I'm not sure how regular it's out, but it's out pretty regularly. And it's got some really awesome guests on there, and there's definitely lots you'll learn from them. I remember one specifically that still sticks in my mind is the one from the guy that did the rubber wedding ring, and the fact that he was talking about a book called Storyboards or Story Branding. And again, something that I read the book and could really resonate with. So definitely recommend checking out the Weird Growth podcast. And if you need any help, then check out ammo.marketing and go and speak to him. And also Jack is online, I see today. So maybe ping him a message and they can help.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you, Ammo. And a Beecham Group. So these guys have been with us since the start. They are a boutique recruitment company here in Perth. If you need talent in your organization, if you're looking for that developer, hopefully Glenn can help you out. I know they're in short supply at the moment, but look, Glenn and the guys at Beecham are very well connected to pretty much everyone here in Perth that's looking for gigs. And
we'd love to. We should probably get Glenn on to just give us a state of the market at the moment, because I know it is absolutely ridiculous out there. You're having had numerous job ads out and now paying probably 50% more than what we were paying a normal thing the same time last year. I'd love to hear, Glenn, if you're here, let's maybe hook something up and understand what the state of the market is like, because it definitely is interesting reading.
Glenn did do a talk in Morning Startup maybe 6 months ago, maybe a year ago now, but it's up on YouTube if you want to go check it out, about hiring in Perth and what little hacks and tips and tricks you can do, because obviously the good talent gets sucked up by mining companies paying massive salaries, but startups, there's some tricks up our sleeves to get good talent as well. So
I heard that senior developers are now contracted and now earning $150 an hour. So it's like,
is that all?
I know. Yeah. Jeez. It's like,
startup salaries. Anyway, Beecham Group, go check them out. Okay, and also these awesome organizations. I'll take Space Cube. So usually we're in Riff, obviously, and they have some co-working spaces down St. George's Terrace, or St. Brodie's Terrace, as we like to call it. We've got Flux and Fern. Make sure you go there, and they've got lots of events, they've got lots of programs, and they've got places you can work when you get sick of working from home.
Brilliant. Startup News, if you haven't subscribed to Startup News, then make sure you do. Go to startupnews.com.au and put your name down, your email, and every Friday you'll get a little bit nugget of startup goodness in your inbox with the guys there. Patrick and Charlie and whatnot are all writing these great articles who basically tell you what's going on in the industry. And for those like myself who feel slightly disconnected from the startup industry now, or the startup scene, getting that bit of information coming in every Friday is golden, and it really kind of helps you understand what's happening in the Perth and WA startup scene. If you haven't subscribed or gone and visited Plus8, I think it's going to be in the next month or so. They're going to open up the next cohort or the next applications for this year's Plus8. I haven't heard anything on the grapevine as yet. Have you heard anything yet, Scott?
No, not the grapevine.
Normally around this time of year, I do know, probably maybe give it end of March, you'll start to hear that they're going to be registering for you to apply for Plus8. And again, if you haven't heard about the Plus8 program, there's two. There's the Plus8 Sprint and the Plus8 Accelerator. And we've got some great companies coming out of them every year. Normally, if you were, or if Scott was in the city, we'd be going to Voltage Espresso. If you haven't get a coffee, go and see Voltage Espresso there. And last but not least, TechBoard. If you haven't claimed your profile, go and see techboard.com.au. Lots of information, a lot of listed companies use it to get information out, but definitely worth checking out. Peter's been doing a great job over there, and especially some of the reports that are coming out on funding. Some of the numbers coming out is amazing.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Move along here. So, too far. So, if you want to reach out to us, we are Morning Startup on all the things. We are constantly looking for awesome speakers to come and shout wisdom at the Perth startup community, like Brad is today. So if you have something that the Perth startup community would love to hear, please get in contact with us. The best place is contact@morningstartup.com. Also got a Slack group. But yeah, Google Morning Startup, you'll find us and get in touch. And today,
there are some shameless plugs that have come in, so we should just get them out of the way.
Let's do it. All right.
Let's get them out. I'll let you take in fact, I'll take the first one here. ScanTech, instantly identity verification allows you for your customers to onboard and verify within minutes. If you want any more information, visit www.scantech.com. Hopefully I've pitched that correctly and I've not done it justice.
Brilliant. Josephine, bloat-free Superflora gut-friendly protein shakes. Go to noisyguts.net/shakes.
Brilliant. And there's one here from Richard. If Richard is a developer, architect, and CTO, he left Perth to go to Malaysia in 2019 and about to move to Vietnam. He's on the lookout for possible remote jobs or anyone who's looking for a connection in Ho Chi Minh.
Oh, hey, Richard. Cool. Richard. And Glenn is online. Cool. So if you need to connect or you're looking for talent, go and chat to Glenn in the chat. Awesome. I think that's all the shameless plugs.
I finally found a senior developer, but not in Perth. So
yeah,
whole remote scene is definitely one. If you're looking for staff, good luck in Perth. But I think you gotta, as Glenn says, you got to think outside the box.
That's right, 100%. All right. Well, I think we can shut up now and we can get into the main beef of this presentation. So, as I said, Brad has been doing this for, I don't know how many years actually, but it seems like you've just turning out products after product after product. So Rain Parrot is one thing that I've been using for years. It shouts at me from my pocket saying, "Rain Parrot." And then, I look at the sky and yeah, you know what? It's about to rain and I've got a hightail at home with my golden retriever in tow. So it's been saving my bacon from getting wet for a few years now. And I was at Founder Sundowner a year or so ago, and this guy Brad Rees was like, "Yeah, I made this app called Rain Parrot." I was like, "What? No way, you're in Perth?" So yeah, I was stoked to hear that. And then he's also been making a range of tools for Shopify called Power Tools. He's worked on a microwave that tries to cook food better using thermal imaging. This thing called Peeps, which helps you remember names. And he's now working on a thing called Speakeasy. So he's going to take you through all of that stuff and everything that he's learned along the way. So I'll let you share your screen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And please make him welcome, Brad Rees.
Thank you. Thanks. Can everyone see me? Like, does that work? Because on my view, I'm not the person.
Yes, you are the person in my view.
Okay.
Once you start presenting, it should come up. So
that's it. Like I am presenting now.
There we go. There you go.
Okay, there we go. Cool. Yeah. So thanks everyone for listening this morning. Thanks to Ammo and Beecham Group for sponsoring the event. Big thanks to Scott and David for organising today. In the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So how's everyone doing? Thanks for that great intro. Yeah, I'm Brad. I'm a founder and engineer at an incubator called Hustle. In addition, I've also worked on a number of startups, and I'm here today to recount some stories from past and present ideas and businesses in the hope that you might learn what's gone well and where things could have gone better. I was tempted to talk about the success stories, but the more I worked on this presentation, the more I realized that the biggest takeaways were from the ideas that kind of didn't live up to my expectations. So we're going to focus a little bit on Rain Parrot and another app called Peeps, as well as some other projects, Power Tools, Micromatic, and my latest startup, Speakeasy. So firstly, just what is Hustle? So its original purpose was to be able to just focus on an idea and not on doing the admin. So when you're setting up a new business, there's so much admin work that it can really kill your enthusiasm before you start. You kind of get burned out before you release anything. It also works to kind of prevent bike shedding, which is bike shedding is when you focus on the kind of the small, simple details because they're kind of easy to comprehend instead of dealing with the complex details that ultimately kind of make or break your idea. The story goes anyway that it comes from a construction of a power plant, and the committee in charge meet up and they spend the whole meeting discussing the color and the placement of a bike shed instead of doing the actual construction of the power plant. So basically Hustle is a structure or a company, if you will, where we can kind of spin up ideas without the large overhead of admin work. When an idea starts to kind of have legs of its own, then we can spin it out as a new entity. That way it kind of delays all the time and expense of the admin until we have a better idea of if the idea is going to work. And hopefully that limits the amount of bike shedding we do. So as an overview, we're going to focus on the bootstrap businesses. By this, I mean businesses that have not been funded or not yet been funded by venture capital. We're going to cover some ideas that I've worked on and the process of turning them into actual businesses, and in some cases, non-businesses. I'd also like to cover the topic of building an MVP, which is a really powerful tool to help you work out if you have an idea that can be turned into a business. I'd also like to cover a few steps of bringing an idea to market via some of the successes and failures that I've had. So let's, I suppose, maybe start with my background. I studied electronic engineering and computer science, and then went straight into a startup called Blinkbox in London. You've probably never heard of it. However, we were like I would like to think anyway, a well-known video platform back in the UK in the late 2000s, just behind kind of YouTube and the BBC in terms of viewers. Perhaps an Australian equivalent would be something like a Stan or a KO or something like that. So Blinkbox did a lot of things right. It followed this kind of typical startup path of raising lots of money and then getting bought by a big multinational. It was eventually rebranded and absorbed into another platform, by which time I'd left and come back to Perth. The thing is, while there's a lot of lessons in that process, and it's quite cool, I really kind of wanted to skip over it today. It wasn't a bootstrap business. It was largely funded by, or at least initially funded by people that were already in the media industry and could clearly see that streaming was going to take over the distribution side of their business in the future. If anyone has any questions about Blinkbox, I'm always super happy to discuss it. I'll set up a topic on Speakeasy specifically for it, and if anyone wants to know more, I'll be there to answer questions, and I'll send a link through later on. As I mentioned, I did want to discuss the lessons learned through working on a number of ideas in the process of bringing them to market. The funny thing is that a lot of these lessons at first kind of contradict each other in a way, or perhaps, maybe go against some common advice that you hear about creating your own startup. But hopefully I can kind of weave it all together and bring some sense and logic to it all. So let's start by talking about Rain Parrot. For those not aware, thanks, Scott, for the great intro there. It's a weather app that sends you a notification when you're about to get rained on. Simple as that. No one likes getting caught in the rain, so you'd think that would be like a super easy sell. And that's what I thought too. But after spending about 6 months or so building it out, it launched to crickets, no users at all. I got to say, I was pretty devastated. I really thought it was going to be a massive hit from day one. The crazy thing was that I'd actually already built a weather app called Raindar, which ended up being, I looked through this, it was like the top free weather app. So, that served as a really good proof of concept and gave me a lot of confidence that there was a market for weather apps. Instead of updating Rain DAR, I started over with some kind of better technology and more experience under my belt. However, even with that, I still couldn't get that early traction. At least one of the problems was that we were cutting new ground. People were not really aware that you could forecast rain accurate to your exact location down to the minute. Then on top of that, have it intelligently notify you of the incoming rain. It all sounded too, I don't know, I suppose, outrageous, too futuristic. Keeping in mind, of course, this was like 8 years ago and, smartphones were fairly new. In fact, there's that scene, I've got it in slides there, in Back to the Future Part 2, when they arrive in 2015 and Doc checks his watch and says, wait, and then the rain stops like right on cue. When we were building it, it really felt like science fiction to be able to do that. Particularly like it actually kind of launched in like 2015 as well. So that's like a crazy coincidence. Anyway, cutting new ground is really hard. And if you have a product that requires you to convince people that they didn't even know they had that problem, let alone there was a solution, then you have to have a really good way of marketing it. And in the case of Rain Parrot, it had two really kind of neat tricks for getting new customers. So let me see, I think firstly, if you remember that campaign for Goodyear, if it only saves you once a year, it's a good year. Well, Rain Parrot kind of had that. If we could just save the user from getting rained on once, they'd be an advocate for the app for years. It also had this pretty cool party trick. You get the alert and you tell someone like, hey, it's going to rain in 17 minutes. And, they'd doubt you. They'd call you out on it. So that, they'd say something like, you mean it's going to rain at 3 minutes past 8? And sure, like as if. And sure enough, it would rain like at 8:03 on the dot. And boom, you've now impressed a whole group of friends, and we've got some new customers. But the problem was that people still didn't get it until they kind of tried it or saw it firsthand. My efforts to use paid advertising failed, and a few months after its dismal launch, I decided to move on to something else. The only thing that saved Rain Parrot was that personally, I loved it. And I had a few friends and they liked it too. So I wasn't going to shut down the servers quite yet. I left it on the App Store, and slowly it started to rise in the rankings until it got to, the second page, and then the first page, and then the top 10, and then it becomes the top app. And at that point, it really becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. There's huge value to being near the top of the App Store. However, it's a chicken and egg type problem. How do you get lots of users? Well, be the top of the App Store. How do you get to the top of the App Store? Have lots of users. You can kind of see the problem. So one solution is to go short and hard with a marketing campaign. However, you've really wanted to have validated your idea and key value proposition before burning through lots of cash. It's a pretty risky strategy to go in really hard, really early. So, which leads me on to talking about MVPs, or a minimum viable product. The key is minimum. But in my experience, that's like really hard. That's a really hard line to draw. Maybe if you add some feature, it will completely change how the product works overall. But, it can be tough getting caught in that line of thinking, particularly when you have a vision that relies on some, multi-stage process. What I mean by that is that if you have like a customer journey that cannot be completed without a feature, do you really have like a viable product? Have you completed that loop of that customer journey of being able to complete whatever goal they're trying to do? So, what are the goals of the MVP? It's got to do a few things. It should be simple enough that you don't spend too much time on it. It should be able to get customers. These customers should be able to use it so they can give you feedback. And then you can use that feedback to iterate. It's much harder to learn from your customers if they can't play around with it. Giving them a tangible tool or product is the best way to get accurate feedback, in my opinion. So let's talk a little bit about Peeps, which is an app myself, my co-founder, Luke, our designer, and David, our developer, built to help you remember people's names. It's I kind of love it. It's this really interesting problem. As most people, when you ask them, will say they have trouble remembering names. It's this universal problem that applies to kind of everyone. We came up with some concepts, and working through them, we finally got to a point where we started to get really excited. We could definitely help people remember names. Like thumbs up, eureka, off to the App Store we go. There has to be a market for this. Let's have a go. So the first step was to build an MVP and see how it went. We tried to build it as quickly as possible while still being a polished product. You do require your app to look decent to get accepted onto the App Store and to be able to get someone to download it. We did outsource the development initially. Typically, I build my own products, but I was tied up with some other work at the time. Outsourcing is always an option. Keep in mind that outsourcing doesn't mean it will be easier. You still need to work closely with your developers, and you'll need to spec out lots of features, work really closely with them. There'll be bugs, there'll be issues, you'll be going back and forth a lot. You end up having a really kind of close relationship if you do outsource. But it's a good way to get started. As from before, you really want your MVP to get customers. We weren't able to get many customers. Being on the App Store alone definitely doesn't guarantee that you'll get customers. And we only had a limited marketing budget for this project. Overall, I was happy we didn't spend too much money or time on it. However, in retrospect, there's probably a couple of features that just weren't required. I was working on this with, as I mentioned, my business partner, and there was this feature that he just, he had to have, he really wanted it. And, being in a partnership, it's all about compromises. So, we added it in, that was no huge problem. But, in hindsight, it was probably not really used and probably held us up for a few weeks or more. The other main issue was that I use an iPhone and he uses an Android phone. And that meant that we had to build it cross-platform if we both wanted to use it. And we both wanted to use it. It would be like kind of crazy to be building an app and not being able to use it yourself. And that just meant it took longer to build and launch. And we were not able to build as good a product as if we just built an iPhone app or just an Android app. So beware of tools that claim to allow cross-platform development. As they say, kind of write once, debug and test everywhere. So keep your MVP a proper MVP. It's often way too easy to get carried away with features you don't need to prove the app will be a success. So Rain Parrot and Peeps had very similar lackluster launches, but very different outcomes. Rain Parrot has regularly been the #1 paid app on the App Store, while Peeps has only had like 4 regular users. It's like myself, my co-founder, Luke, the designer, and some other person who I presume is David, the developer. Early traction is often quoted as being everything, but I'm not so sure. It really depends on if you can afford to play the long game. If you've taken investor money, then early traction really is critical. Otherwise, you'll burn through your cash and you won't be able to raise more. But if you're bootstrapped and you feel like you've still got, like, there's more to the idea, then maybe it's worth it to keep going. So how do you know when to pull the pin? In the case of Rain Parrot, it was all about talking to users and seeing their reactions. While I didn't have many users, those users would give me feedback. They'd tell me about the app. It saved me from getting rained on, or it would be cool if it did this, or it'd be cool if it did that. Peeps, on the other hand, like, it never had those moments. I'd show it to people and then never really hear back. I don't recall anyone coming up to me and telling me that Peeps had saved them from some awkward situation, which I found, like, really surprising. It had saved me loads of times. But the thing was, that was our value proposition, and it wasn't delivering on that. I never had a feature request for what we should add next to Peeps. Going back to our kind of 4 steps to build an MVP, which are, build small, get users, get feedback, then iterate. If you can't get feedback, then you can't iterate. If you're no longer iterating, then, maybe it's time to call it, or at least park it and explore other opportunities. Maybe it's a good time to pivot to something else. So, as mentioned, Power Tools is a collection of apps to help e-commerce merchants. And from day one, it had customers and it was getting feedback. It was a very rough product to start with. But, ultimately it was shaped by the feedback we got from customers. It followed that MVP model and has been a great example of how to, at least in my mind, totally biased, but, it's a great example of how to bootstrap a company. Start small and iterate. And, it's now turned into, like, this great little business. When I started it, it had this goal, and it was to make enough money to pay for my living expenses purely so I could work on startups. And it kind of surpassed that point around, maybe 12 months in. It wasn't overnight or anything, but, about a year of slogging it out. But what's really interesting, I think, is how my attitude changed. When you have some skin in the game, it's really easy to kind of focus on what is working, what's making money. And in the case of Power Tools, we were just at the right place in the right time. And timing is everything, unfortunately. I rode the wave of the e-commerce expansion, and as they say, a rising tide raises all ships. Sometimes you just get lucky. But at the end of the day, you have to be in it to win it. So speaking of trying to catch trends, let's talk a bit about the Micromatic. I totally love the Micromatic. It's a microwave with a thermal camera in it, and it watches your food getting cooked, and it adjusts the energy to ensure that it comes out at the perfect temperature. I thought the timing of that was perfect, as there was, like, loads of buzz at the time around hardware-based startups. As with Rain Parrot, it had one of these moments where you can't believe that kind of the technology has come so far. It was like this perfect product, or so I thought. No longer would you buy this kind of crappy microwave. You'd buy a Micromatic and have perfectly reheated food every time. It took a while to build and cost a fair amount of capital. I even kind of set the house on fire at one point. But the real issue with it is both technical and commercial. It's just a bit too ahead of its time in some ways. I don't know, it kind of, maybe pushes the envelope a bit too far. Most people, they only want to spend a couple $100s on a microwave. And we really couldn't see ourselves being able to sell the Micromatic for, what would be kind of 10 times that. We thought there might be a market for it at that price, but, we just couldn't find it. In addition, there's some really, like, weird edge cases due to the physics of how, like, thermal imaging works, which would cost even more money to resolve. Not all businesses, not all ideas, can be businesses, and that's okay. as I mentioned before, I did electronic engineering. However, I never actually became an electronic engineer. I went directly into software. So working on the Micromatic was this really enjoyable project for me where, pardon me, where I got to learn to be a proper hardware engineer. Sorry, give me 2 secs. Oh God, I hope I'm not getting something. I got to design circuit boards, deal with RF issues, use real-time operating systems, learning about lots of other areas that startups have to deal with. On top of that, I built it with the help of a mate, and we had a great time cooking up like the best scrambled eggs you've ever tasted, and then being able to write it off as a tax deduction. I think the tax deduction is actually what made them taste the best. But I don't regret any of the time that I spent on it, because at the end of the day, it was fun and we learned loads. So, Peeps also suffers from this thing where the solution, we're being, sorry. Peeps also suffers from where like the solution, it just doesn't work. It costs more to solve it than what the user is willing to spend. You download the app and you have to enter all these people's names and keep it up to date. It seems that people would rather forget the odd name than spend time keeping a record of all the people you meet. We didn't know this before, but we do now, and it's the only way to find out. And the only way to find that out was to put the product in people's hands. It's really important when you're trying to validate your idea that you ask the right questions. As a founder, you always want to talk about your idea and how it's going to revolutionize the world. And, you get so good at pitching and convincing people about an idea that it becomes really hard to get some honest feedback from a customer or potential customer. Instead of talking about your idea, you need to ask them about the problems they have and also the steps they have taken to solve it. In the case of Peeps, we asked people if they had trouble remembering names, and we actually even found some people that keep a notes file of people's names. So at that stage, the idea looked really promising. They had a problem, and they'd taken steps to remedy it. They hadn't spent any money yet, which is, then the question becomes on us to see if we could execute the idea well enough that it could be something someone would pay for. And then, this kind of brings me to my next point. Don't listen to what I say or anyone else for that matter. I mean, at the end of the day, no one knows if your idea is going to be a success, even you. All you can do is try it out and see if you get traction. And if you fail, it sucks. But use what you've learned to go on and do something else. And use that the kind of the knowledge you gain of building something to help you out with your next big idea. Don't be afraid of failure. It's part of the process of iterating. Also, be wary of anecdotes. The type where a person does X and then they're this huge success. It never kind of works like that in reality. The full story is much more complicated. There's any number of confounding factors that mean, what is good advice for one business is, it doesn't apply to another business. I love a good success story, but unless you can directly apply that to your business, then it's just that. It's just a cool and inspirational story. And, inspirational stories are great. You need power, you need energy to do these things. It can, get quite, it requires a lot of effort to build a startup. Now, I'm not saying go against the grain on everything, by the way. There's some amazing resources out there and amazing people that genuinely do want to help you succeed. And this can prevent a lot of like costly mistakes. But just remember to kind of take everything as a suggestion and use your intimate knowledge of your business and domain to come to a conclusion on whether you want to take action or not. So how do you come up with an idea? For me, it really varies. You know, overall, I would say I come up with loads of kind of terrible ideas, and you know, some of them are good, and I keep them in a notes file just as a hobby. If you leave it for a bit and then you come back to it later and it still excites you, then you know you're probably onto something. I think given a little bit of time and a little bit of you know, I suppose the ability to have a bit of a retrospective on an idea is really great for filtering out the ones that kind of don't work. You know, most of these problems are things that I'm trying to solve in my everyday life. And again, not all problems need solutions. You know, the counterexample is, you know, something like, say, I don't know, power tools. You know, I was trying to set up an online store with my wife and we couldn't find some features that I'd already built at Blinkbox. These were good ideas that generated significant user engagement. So I set about building them for myself first for our online store. And then I made it generic so anyone could have these features on their store too. So, you know, it really kind of started small and grew, but using my experience from previous domains. So my current startup is called Speakeasy. And the way that came about was we were working on a platform for freelancers and contractors called Hire. It had this communication component amongst a whole host of other features. And, you know, during COVID, we started looking for a way to talk to our team and also our contractors, potential hires, consultants, partners, other startups, so on. So we spun out the communication component as a separate product. The logic being, if we liked it ourselves, then, you know, there's got to be other people in the same position as us. It was clearly better as a concept than what was currently on the market. You know, at first it was missing features and it was, you know, had a few bugs, but, you know, these are all problems that can be resolved with, you know, more time and effort. I think the real moment for me was when our team just one day stopped using Slack. We didn't ask or force it. We'd just gotten to a point where we had a better product that people just organically wanted to use. We've been doing job interviews, speaking with investors, other startups, companies like Ammo, who, you know, Ammo is doing our marketing, and we do it all on Speakeasy. It's really kind of surprising what you find out, though. One of our original goals was to be able to set up a chat or a call really easily without onboarding them into your, you know, having this big onboarding process like you would have with, you know, something like Slack or Teams or some equivalent. And we achieved that, but the side effect is that it's actually been a really good little kind of like micro project management tool. I mean, I wouldn't have explicitly thought that at the start, but that's how we've ended up using it on a kind of daily basis. So, you know, let's say we're working on a new feature, we create a new topic, invite just the people that are going to work on that feature and kick off the work. There are two big upsides to this over a tool like Slack or Teams. Firstly, there's fewer notifications, so you only get notified on, you know, if you're actually involved in the project or topic. You know, people do get notification fatigue and it's disruptive to their workday. Secondly, topics almost become this kind of disposable workspace where you do the work and once it's done, you just kind of move on. Since the topics have a title, they're much better than threads and they're easy to spin up with only the people that need to be there. It's just kind of more organized and a more, I suppose, organic way of working. We found it like a really great tool for startups. Like we use it ourselves for building like our products. So, you know, for our journey, we're at the point where we have a product that's ready for widespread use and we're really trying to get these early users so we can get some feedback and we can iterate. I'd really appreciate it if everyone can join one or more of the topics we've set up and continue the conversation there. I think we're going to move on to like that quick Q&A session, or I mean, it might not be quick, but a Q&A session now. But follow some of the links or the QR code that's up there at the moment. Full disclaimer: your email address will be visible to other people that join that topic. So if you don't want to share your email, then just DM me directly, I suppose, in the Zoom chat, and I'll send you a little message and onboard you and get you started. So yeah, in summary, build an MVP and iterate until you can't iterate anymore. It's possible to predict the weather, but not whether your idea will be a success, or at least I can't do it. When speaking to customers, always try and put yourself in their shoes and ask them about their problems. Don't tell them about your solution. Not all problems have a worthy solution. Sometimes the solution is more work than the problem it's trying to solve. Early traction is great, but sometimes it's not the best indicator. And finally, don't listen to me, except that you should totally sign up to Speakeasy and tell your friends how great it is. So that's it. I think at that point, let's open the floor. I'll paste a link.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Some awesome nuggets of wisdom in there for sure. I'm trying to join into the Speakeasy topic as well, but looks like we've got a few questions in the chat. So Richard says, given your focus on feedback and iteration, what things do you recommend building your app from the start to make these things easier? Like, are there any tools, technologies that you sort of bake in and have had good experience with?
Yeah, look, I think that's a fantastic question. I know you, a couple of weeks ago, there was a session on like no code tools and low code tools. And I think things like that, as well as tools like Sketch and Adobe XD, they're really good for prototyping. I wouldn't recommend like a no code solution for like an actual polished product. I mean, like it really depends, right? These no code solutions, they've been around for ages. You think like that's what Excel is, that's what Microsoft Access was, which you see in enterprise organizations the world over. And I think the no code tools are maybe starting to replace some of those things a little bit. But that's where you've got a really small number of users. They're in a corporate environment, so that there's not a lot of issues around security and other things like that. So, at the point where you're starting to actually build a commercial product, I think, for me, I don't know, maybe it's maybe snobbish or something. I don't know. Like I would say you've got to dive in. You've got to be using tools like Rails or Node or Django or the like Ruby, JavaScript, Python. You're kind of really kind of powerful programming languages, but you don't need to validate your idea using those languages. It takes a long time to develop something using those types of languages. If there is a no-code solution that works well for you, that you're confident in using, then maybe that's the best solution for you. I don't know. Does that?
Yeah, I think so. So obviously prototyping. In fact, we had a good talk a couple of weeks ago on no code itself, and they actually created an app in 30 minutes, which was pretty cool. So there's a lot of technologies out there just for getting something quick off the ground. But I guess if you are a programmer and you know how to write a proper app, just the getting feedback from your users. I know there are things out there like Segment where you can just kind of throw everything into a kind of their database and then push that to different tools. Is there anything that you have tried along those lines, or are you Speakeasy?
Yeah, look, we've used Segment. Segment's I don't know. I think the promise. I don't. Maybe I shouldn't be too harsh on it, because in my experience, I think Segment is a tool for bigger organizations. Like if you're looking at using Segment, it's probably easier to not use Segment. early. You can get away with a lot before you need to use tools like that. Google Analytics. You can use the tools like Intercom. Intercom's got like a startup program. What else? I mean, lots of you can always look at your own database as well. Like that's not a there's a whole thing around like, you have to use these cool tools with all these fancy graphs. But at the end of the day, if you've just got like a file with some key metrics and you query the database and write them in the file or whatever, that's okay too. You don't have to.
I think that's great advice. You can spend forever looking at the range of tools on Product Hunt and whatever, saying, that could help this. But yes, what do you need to track? What do you need to look at, and create a Google sheet or something?
Yeah.
Simple.
All right. We've got any other chats? So I know we've got two things going on. We've got the Speakeasy group and we've got the Zoom chat as well. But that's cool. Put your questions wherever they need to go. We'll look at them.
There is a question here from C, e.g. perhaps question for later, thoughts around minimal viable product versus minimal lovable product. To me, they're kind of the same, but just to see if you've got any thoughts on that, Brad.
Yeah, look, I would say like minimum lovable product is like, it's a great description. Like it really is. We use it quite a bit. I think, there's not a huge difference, to be honest. Like a viable product needs to be loved. Like if it's not getting loved, then you're probably not getting that feedback. And if you're not getting the feedback, you can't iterate. So, I think I prefer the terminology of minimum lovable product, but I think it's really kind of the same thing. I wouldn't, when we talk about a lovable product or a viable product, there's not, for me, it's the same thing. Yeah,
me too. Same thing. If you can't build if your viable product's not loved, then it's not viable. So,
yeah, that's right.
Are there any more questions? If they are, I'm not on the Speakeasy. I'm just trying to get on it now. But is there any other questions?
One from Alexander here. He says, "What's your opinion on starting with building MVP as a web app PWA versus native apps?"
Well, yeah. I mean, like I've got a bit of experience in this area. I've tried it all, and look, you can't get away from the fact that a native app is better. Like they just are better, but they take so much longer to build. It really depends on how complex your app is, because if you've got, the native frameworks can be quite good for building simple things where, if you can smash it out in a few days or a week or whatever, just to get something really basic, then go native. You start to get into frameworks like React Native and so on, and they're okay as well. They're kind of bridging that gap between it's kind of native, it's kind of web technology, it's written in JavaScript and stuff. But the final product of a React Native app is not as good as a native app. Like that's very clear to me, particularly when you start trying to interface with some of the more complex things around, what the operating system can do. So there's a big thing with, if you want to get featured by Apple, one of the best ways is to adopt a new technology that they've just brought out. So in iOS 16, there'll be some new feature, and they'll tell that to the developers, a few months ahead of time. And then if you build an app and put that on the App Store, you'll get featured probably as a showcase of, hey, this is a cool new feature. And you can't really do that stuff with React Native. Then you take another step down again and you go into a PWA or I suppose a web hosted application. And there are some really big advantages to doing that, but you can't get away from the fact that again, you can't use the system, the latest features in the operating system as easily. I mean, you can still do it, but it's not as easy. And then, it's not going to look as nice. There's going to be this kind of weird user experience bugs and so forth. You can definitely spend time on it, making it better, but it does start to get to a point where you're like, hold on, I could have just built this in natively by now, instead of trying to fix all these weird edge cases and things like that. I don't think Apple in particular wants PWAs. I think they're quite against them, fundamentally against them. They want people using native apps, and I do think that they do some weird, maybe it's not intentional, maybe it's just that they're hard to build from Apple's point of view, but it does feel like they kind of don't support things quite as well as what they support on their native platform. And look, I'm not saying, maybe I am saying that that's an intentional decision by Apple. I do think that web apps and PWAs are quite complex, and maybe in Apple's case they're just a little bit lagging. Like people do accuse them of a lot of stuff, but they do eventually get there. So yeah, I think if you can build native. If you can't build native, probably React Native or Flutter or something like that's probably second best. And then if you really want to build something quick, you can use like a PWA or similar type thing. There is one really big advantage to doing a PWA or a web hosted type application, and that's that you can share one code base, which for a startup is like amazing. It also enables you to build features that perhaps you couldn't build in your native app. I can expand on that one a bit later because we're going down that road at the moment with some features, but yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I often think
I'm fan to chat and Speakeasy about it.
Yeah, I often think that a lot of startups will always go down the React Native route purely because of a time and cost basis, because you can get both Android and iOS out of React Native than rather than going building the individual ones. So it's obviously the toss up if you go for a pure native one or go for something that's across the two. So any more questions? I haven't seen any more questions on.
Yeah, there's some more questions in the chat, Dave. So Matt, this might be related to what we just talked about actually. Any thoughts on building your code library over multiple projects, helping to build faster in the future?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think what has actually happened to me is I don't have like a package, or we don't have a package that we reuse. But what we do is we definitely like pick pieces out. I think as we have full access to both code bases, and often you find that maybe it doesn't quite translate. I think if you're building a library, you end up having to kind of cater to all situations, to all people. If you're building a specific product, you can really focus in on just solving that exact problem. So I'd say like we do it a bit, but probably not in the way that you kind of expect. In that, it's just small. Oh hey, like we need to send push notifications. Like we'll grab the push notification code from this app and we'll paste it into this app, and then change it around and fix it up and see what works, see what doesn't, and then go from there. And that's a much more lightweight way of doing it rather than trying to build this big library that caters to all people in all cases.
Awesome. Sorry, I was on mute there. Cool. Semiak says, when we try to start something, then what will be the failure rate against success rate? And what should be our backup plan? And is it good to hang on for a longer time if nothing is coming out? I hope that made sense. I guess it's a pretty individual question.
Yeah. So, I love this question. That's that quote from Rick and Morty. I shouldn't say I shouldn't be quoting Rick and Morty. God, do it. But the only thing dumber than planning is planning for failure, right? So that's Rick says that, not me. Okay, but like your backup plan is don't plan for failure. Firstly, like it's you've got to look at it as like, hey, we're going to be successful, and then at some point you call it and you say, okay, we're not doing this anymore. I think the backup plan it's not really a backup plan. It's get feedback, iterate, keep working on it. That's and pivot. Maybe you're close to an idea, maybe it's not quite right. As well, like I think there's a whole topic of conversation around failure rate versus payoff, right? There's a risk and reward. So, if you're building a small product that doesn't cost you very much, then you probably, and maybe it's not going to have much upside either, then, if it's not looking great, just, move on. If you're building like a big product where the potential upside is massive, it's going to be the next unicorn or Deca unicorn or whatever you think it is, then it's really worth kind of sticking it out for the long haul, because the payoff is huge. I think you kind of get those signs like, are you getting the feedback? Do people love it? Is it a lovable product? I've heard there's that great kind of quote. Oh yeah, I can't. Anyway, we'll move on. I think that's kind of covers that one.
Yeah. So Brittany's asked a question. I'm not quite sure what. Just asking to expand, but she says, if my product is subscription based and will eventually have an app for users to manage their subscription, when should an app be introduced to consumers?
Well, I know what Brittany's model is. So basically, just to hopefully, Brittany, I do you justice here. So Brittany's got a company called Britamin. Hopefully, it's a cool name, and it's a subscription service where you can receive vitamins and that delivered to your door, and you have an online package. So think of HelloFresh, but for vitamins delivered. Brittany, hopefully I've done you justice. If not, shout and we'll let you come on and put me right. But essentially, I believe it's, where does she come from being an online platform to moving to a mobile app, or does she bother moving to a mobile app?
Yeah, look, tough question. Wow. Look, I think on the one hand, I'd say that those types of businesses, they don't typically lend themselves well to mobile apps. Like getting people to download an app is really hard. I think your website is probably going to be the main port that people are going to use it on. But having said that, like it would actually be pretty cool if you could manage your subscription on an app. And you're probably going to have some dedicated customers, and they might want to, as long as your app can deliver some value. I think as well, when you're building an app, like what does the app do that the website doesn't do? And if it doesn't do anything that the website doesn't do, then don't build it. Apps, typically they would do things like push notifications or geolocation, maybe use a camera. They use the hardware features of the phone, and that's where you should be using an app. If your service doesn't need to make use of any of those features, then it's probably not great as an app, and it's probably better keeping it as a website. I think a great example at the moment is Wordle. That's a web app, and the reason is because it doesn't need to be an app, and it's so much easier to just access it on the web. It's a very nicely optimized web app. It works very well on mobile, but it doesn't use any of the specific features of a mobile device. In the case of Rain Parrot, it uses the geolocation and the push notifications. And so, it needs to be an app. In the case of Speakeasy, it uses the push notifications. So in order to send you, notify you that you've got a new message. They're really good examples of why you would build it as an app. In terms of a subscription service, unless you have a reason for push notifications, it might not work out. I mean, I don't think you'd need geolocation or cameras or anything like that. but with push notifications, maybe you could tell, notify people, hey, your delivery is coming in, an hour. It'll be at your front door. Make sure you put it in the fridge or something, if it's some probiotics, something like that. But, that could also be done as a text message, or it could be done as an email. So, I'm not, look, I can't give a full answer, but like, because I don't know the intimate details of your business, but I think it sounds like you're probably better off sticking with a web app at this stage.
I would agree as well from that. I would just say, Brittany, stick with the web app to begin with. A mobile app would be nice to have when you're pulling in lots of cash. And like you said, rightly said, if you want push notifications, a text message can be knack just as well, and knack from a web app or website. Any more questions on this list here? So I got a, let's just see there, because I got one there. I appreciate it. One element to consider a sub box that looks like a bit of advice from C to Brittany, also about ouch versus ouch. Or have I said that incorrectly as a non-techie?
I just had a thought on that too. So with Peeps, obviously you're just sort of entering names into an app to try and remember them in some way. You're not using a camera or any of the sort of hardware features, but it's more based on, it's an app because people use it when they're out and about. They're not in front of a desktop machine. But is that an issue? Like you could still do that in the browser on your phone, right?
Yeah, so Peeps actually does. I'll call it up right now because I'm not sure, that doesn't seem to be working with the camera too well. But what it does is it actually uses some geolocation data as well. Right. Okay. So the idea is that it will show you the names of the people that you're probably going to be closest to. So I'm in Subi at the moment, and it shows me the people that I know, like colleagues, and I've got a friend who lives just kind of a couple of streets away, so they show at the top of the list. So it's quite a cool little system there. The other reason why we built it as a mobile app, I think, was because we were pretty conscious about people's privacy. Now, I think that may have also been a bit of a mistake. I think we overestimated people's care factor on privacy. So Peeps was supposed to be like this, it's ultra secure. It's like your little black book and, whatever. We definitely made it harder on ourselves by doing that. It would have been better if we had like a centrally hosted server and we could, do it as a web app or something like that, or, offline, multiple device access, that sort of stuff, which you don't get with the app. So we also wanted to make use of some of the operating system features. In particular, we wanted to make use of the widgets component. So, iOS in particular has widgets. And so we wanted it to show you the kind of the most likely person that you're nearby to. And that would kind of constantly update. We never actually built that bit because, we never got, as I said, we never got any feedback. But that was kind of on the feature list of things we wanted to build. So there was a few reasons for making that a mobile app, and I think as well. And one other feature, we wanted to use Face ID. So have that kind of it is your little black book. You can put in private notes in there. Right. You can make notes about a person that they maybe don't want to see. I mean, like we never meant it to be like intentionally like that, but the way you remember someone might be, they've got funny hair or something. I don't know. And you probably don't want them seeing that you've written in that they've got funny hair. Actually, yeah. So I think there were plenty of reasons to make Peeps a mobile app. I don't think it. Hard to say. I don't think it would have worked as well as a web app, but that could be totally wrong.
So, question for you: where to now? Obviously, you've got Speakeasy. What's your primary focus? What the products you're working on? Hope will go large.
Yeah, well, so that's it. Yeah, so it's Speakeasy at the moment. Definitely. The other apps are in a great place. We've got a team there. So they're kind of continually working on the kind of existing products. So it's we're really trying to push Speakeasy, get some users, get that feedback, get people to try it out, just so that, you know, we can kind of take it to the next step. Yeah.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
So one final ask to the Morning Startup audience. Yes, go and try out Speakeasy. You've got the link. It's kind of cool, actually. So we got this little group now with people on this session, and we can use this to get feedback. And yeah, so if you got any feedback about Morning Startup in general, throw it in this Speakeasy chat. And is there a way for people to give feedback to you about Speakeasy?
Yeah, so we do actually have a like a feedback site, and there's a link in the app for that.
Okay.
If there's not, we'll very quickly add one. That's the great thing about building your own products, right? You can just quickly update them. But yeah, we use user voice for feedback. But otherwise, you know, just drop me a message. I'm in the chat. Like, to be honest, just drop me a message. I'd much rather to, you know, hear exactly what you're thinking, instead of it just being, you know, some, you know, email. You know, let's have a chat, basically. You know, I always like chatting about stuff. So
awesome. Well, we've definitely enjoyed hearing your experience and what you've been through, and your little tidbits of your nuggets of wisdom. It's certainly struck a chord with some of the things that I'm working on, and I hope it's done the same thing for the audience here. So thanks everyone for coming along, and thank you so much, Brad, for sharing.
Yeah.
Oh no, thank you everyone. Thanks for listening, and it's been great.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Scott, who do we have on next?
We have Charlie Gunningham. So he's going to be talking about the Innovation Booster Grant. So if you've heard about the innovation vouchers before in Perth, they're now called the Innovation Booster Grant. And he's going to tell you how you can hopefully get some of that sweet money from the government to help your startup on its next step. So come along, 2 weeks time. And it will be an online session again like this. So just go to the meetup page, RSVP, and you'll get access to the Zoom link, just like this one.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Everybody,
awesome.
Everybody else is online. Thank you very much. I will do the traditional promote you all to panelists now, just so we can see your beautiful faces. So if you want to come on and share us, then
we should have done this earlier during the Q&A session, so people could actually ask their questions. That would be cool. Yes, we'll do that next time.
We do this normally just to see everybody, and it's always interesting because you always get those who have got their who's in their hoodies or their pajamas.
And meanwhile, people are like leaving. No, I don't want to.
No, not me. So feel free to share your webcam. Jonathan Lilly, my God, as gorgeous as ever. You're on mute, mate. You're on mute. Brilliant.
Josh, Josephine, John, how you going? Good to see you. I need to change my view.
I do. I need to stop. I need to stop. I don't know how to unpromote you for some reason. Oh, remove spotlight. There we go. That's better. So everybody else will now be on here. So
how are you, Dave?
Not too bad, sir. Not too bad. Good to see you, sir. Good to see you.
You too, mate. Been a while.
So
it's good to see you, Richard, up there. You know, I haven't seen you down in Perth for a long time. So glad you could finally join a session.
Just waiting for your borders to open, mate.
I definitely think there's a market for what you're offering there, Richard. That's for sure. Given the current constraints in Perth, we've moved our model now to a completely remote development model versus paying the extra 40% for devs here in Perth. So interesting times in startup world, that's for sure.
Remote, it's the way of the future.
It is. Actually, do you know what? That'd be a really good interesting, because there's a few people I've been talking to who have all moved to this model. Obviously, Tim Brewer is a massive advocate for it with Functionally. I was speaking to Andrew Hall I just know them as the old former Formalytics, but I know they've changed their name about 5 times. I know that a lot of people in all startups now are moving to this fully remote. They're paying the rest of the world kind of senior developer prices, but that extra they're factoring in to meet their devs somewhere in the world every 12 weeks. So it's quite an interesting development model. So yeah, maybe that's a topic for discussion. So
yeah.
Never mind. Well, I'm going to jump off now because if you're interested and you want to stick around, I will share this link with you all in the feed. There is actually a one for Tractor Ventures, or the future funding of Funding Down Under, which has been hosted by Folklore Ventures. If you want to register for that, if you just Google Funding Down Under, I've seen it a few times coming up in my Down Under. Let me just see if it comes up. Folklore. I will share that in the description. If you quickly register, they will send you a link to it. So I think it's here. Give me 2 seconds. So if you want to watch that, then by all means, here you go. I will. The state of Australian funding. Here we go. Right. I will throw that into. No, wrong link. Wrong link. The pressure is too much. Wrong link. Come on, bloody Twitter. Where is it? I'll put this link anyway into the chat.
Chuck it in the Speakeasy.
I'll chuck it in the Speakeasy as well. Not Richard.
Yeah.
Everybody.
It's pretty cool.
And I will put that across there into the Speakeasy bucket, which I've got 100 different ones open. There we go, Speakeasy. There you go. There's one report, and I will just dig out this link for the other one because it's about to start. Where have you gone? If anybody else is able to help me out and find it, it would be greatly appreciated.
The state of Australian startup funding.
Maybe I've got it wrong.
So, well, this is a webinar. This is a session that's about to start.
Scott, I'm going to message you, mate, and if there's any way I can get it from my mobile onto where's Slack gone? Slack, there you go.
This is going to make a riveting ending to the YouTube live stream, I'm sure.
It is. In fact, do you know what? Stop on that now. Here we go. Stop.